If you're in the market for a pre-built gaming PC and you have $1,000 to spend, you're definitely tuning into the right video. So in this video, I'll be covering the best pre-built gaming PCs under $1,000 in July 2023. And maybe you don't have the budget right now, or you're just not looking at this moment, but maybe you'll be looking in the future. Definitely get subscribed because we will be continuing the series every month for the foreseeable future, covering a bunch of different budgets for pre-builts and other PC components. So definitely get subscribed. But before we jump into the actual builds, I want to give you guys an idea of what you should expect overall in terms of specs. So from a CPU perspective, you're probably looking at either a Ryzen 5, maybe even a Ryzen 7 from AMD, and maybe on the Intel side, either a Core i5, current gen or last gen, or possibly an i7. And from a GPU perspective, you're looking at closer to an RTX 3060, maybe a 3060 Ti, and even a 4060 with the latest release. And then for any of these PCs, you should be looking at 16 gigs of RAM at least a 500 gig SSD, and hopefully 500 watt power supply or above, so you can upgrade and make improvements down the line. So let's just jump into the builds and show you guys the best PCs that you can buy right now under $1,000 in 2023. First up, we have our HP Victus 15 liter. And this build is typically on these $1,000 pre-built lists just because you get really good specs for a really good budget. So at $919, we get an i7-12700, an RTX 3060, 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 megahertz memory, a 500 gig SSD, a 1 terabyte HDD, and a 500 watt 80 plus bronze certified power supply. So overall, you're thinking, wow, really, really good performance specs, some really good hardware, but at that price, how are they doing it? And the biggest thing is HP is using a lot of proprietary motherboard, power supply, overall, case layout things that don't allow for super great upgradability down the line. Maybe not the best temperatures for the hardware just because you're limiting a lot of the airflow with the case design, but you can get really good specs at a really low price point. So for $919, an i7 and a 3060, really, really good deal. Maybe not going to be able to take full advantage of that hardware in this case, and you're not going to be able to do a lot of upgrades down the line. So jumping into our more upgradable builds, next up we have the HP Omen 25 liter. Now with this build, you're getting much more standardized components, even though they are still designed by HP, with the the case, motherboard, and power supply being very much upgradable down the line. And in terms of specs, you're looking at an i5-13400F, so the latest generation of the i5 processor. You're also then getting the RTX 3060, 16 gigs of DDR5 memory, so a nice performance uplift there. And then we also get a 1 terabyte SSD and a 500 watt power supply. So from these specs now, we're dropping down from a last gen i7 to a current gen i5. So the core count is definitely going to be a little bit less, but you're upgrading to DDR5 memory and slightly faster core clocks on these latest gen Intel CPUs. So the trade-off there, maybe you're dropping a little bit when it comes to CPU specs, but the case design allows for a lot better airflow than with the 15 liter Victus, and you're getting a lot more upgradability down the line at a $949 price point. So for the extra $30, a much more, standard case, 10 liters larger than the Victus 15 liter, so a lot more upgrades that you can make down the line. And overall, you're not dropping that much in performance, going from that i7-12700 to a 13400F. But for the exact same price of $949, you can get yourself an NZXT Player 1 PC. Now, when it comes to this build, you're looking at all off-the-shelf components, but you are definitely downgrading when it comes to specs. So for the CPU, we have an i5-12400F, so a last generation version of what's in the HP 25 liter, still an RTX 3060, 16 gigs of DDR4 memory, and then a 500 gig SSD with a 650 watt 80 plus gold power supply. So the power supply is nice because you can make some more upgrades compared to that 500 watt version in the Victus and the Omen, but you're definitely limiting yourself on the specs that come with the build itself. So the i5-12400 is no slouch, but it's definitely not going to perform as well as a 12700 or the 13400F. But you can make a lot of upgrades, and the overall aesthetic of this build is a little bit nicer compared to the HP designs because you're getting what a lot of consumers are buying off the shelf for their custom PC builds with these NZXT cases. One of the other features is that you do get a B760 motherboard, so you're lacking overclocking, but it is a latest generation board, so you can use a lot of the newer chips, 13th gen chips, if you wanted to then upgrade down the line. So upgradability is a key selling point for this build, but pure specs out of the box is just not going to match what you get from HP. And at the exact same $949 price point, we can jump our game up to an RTX 4060 with the Skytech Chronos gaming PC on Newegg. So this Skytech build, again, uses all off-the-shelf components like the NZXT one. We have a Fantex case, MSI, Asus, or another brand when it comes to the motherboard, GPU, and power supply. So everything can be upgraded down the line. And when it comes to specs, we're looking at a Ryzen 5 5600X. So it is last generation Ryzen, but still very sought after CPU for gaming. We get that RTX 4060, we get 16 gigs of RAM, a 1 terabyte SSD, and a 650 watt 80 plus gold power supply. So you can do all kinds of upgrades with this build down the line, 4060 Ti, 4070, upgrading your CPU to a 5700X, 5800X, maybe even one of the X3D CPUs down the line. So very competitive when it comes to the specs on the CPU side compared to the builds that we just saw, plus you're now getting an RTX 4060. And the 4060 is definitely not what we were expecting. The hype definitely didn't live up with the 40 series generation, but it is still a performance improvement over the RTX 3060 at the exact same price point. Now, when it comes to all four of these builds, they all have their own selling feature that kind of differentiates them from the other builds. For the Victus 15 liter, it is definitely that i7-12700. It's the best CPU out of the bunch. When it comes to the HP Omen 25 liter, now we're looking at DDR5 memory that none of the other builds have and definitely suits you well for upgrading down the line. When it comes to that NZXT build, it's really the aesthetic of an NZXT build. You're getting an NZXT case, all off-the-shelf components, which allows for great upgradability out of the box. And you're also getting very good performance. And when it comes to these last builds from Skytech, now we're looking at the RTX 4060, which is the best GPU out of the bunch. These are all very similarly priced at either $919 for that 15 liter or $949 for the rest of the builds. So now it's just kind of weighing your options. Do you want the CPU but maybe lack the upgradability? Do you want the best GPU but maybe give up on overall design, aesthetic, and feel of the build? That's kind of up to you. For me, the best build is definitely going to be the Skytech just because you're getting latest gen hardware on the GPU side, but the other builds you definitely can't go wrong. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you haven't already, get subscribed to the channel. If you enjoyed the video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next one.